Well, amen. It's been a good morning already. And I want to take us back today to the year 1894. 1894. And in 1894, the field of physics had made tremendous strides. And they were holding a meeting in England called the British Association for the Advancement of Science and Physics. And at this meeting, they had a keynote presenter, and we have a picture of the keynote presenter, and he's rocking the original beard here. And this is Lord Kelvin, and Lord Kelvin was to present on the field of physics and what the latest and the greatest was at that time. And he said this. He said, "There is nothing new to be discovered in physics now. All that remains is more and more precise measurement." Nothing new to be discovered now, only in physics now, only more and more precise measurement. So, folks, close the book on physics. We're done. Nothing else to see here. Let's just go home, right? And then about 5 years later, a guy shows up and he writes a paper on special relativity. And this guy, you might recognize this guy, he looks a little bit more fun than Lord Kelvin. I probably would want to hang out with him if I were looking to have a fun Friday night. And Albert Einstein wrote a paper on special relativity that literally ushered in a brand new way of thinking. And it took 200 years of study in physics, and it shifted it, and it began to move in a new and fresh direction. And we call that a paradigm shift. So a paradigm shift happened in the field of physics, and a paradigm shift is a fundamental change in approach or underlying assumptions. A fundamental change in approach or underlying assumptions. And so today we're going to look at a paradigm shift of sorts that Jesus ushers in on the earth that has to do with serving others. Look, Jesus ushered in this new paradigm shift because in the world at the time, similar to our world in this season that which we find ourselves living, that in that day, he challenged the assumption that the higher you rise, the more power you have, the more wealth that you accumulate in your life, well, then that means more people should then in turn serve you. And more people should meet your needs. And that still rings true, as I mentioned, for us today. We've been in this teaching series now called How to Bless Your Neighbor. And we are in the next to last week of this series. And we've gone all the way back to Genesis 12. And in Genesis 12, God tells Abraham, look, I want to bless you so that in turn you can bless other people. You will be blessed to be a blessing. And so we fast forward to the time of Christ, and Christ is in the lineage of the Jewish people. He was a Jewish man, and ultimately God holds true on this. Abraham, you're going to be a blessing. I'm going to bless you so that you can be a blessing to others. And this comes to full fruition in the person of Christ. And so we begin to look at that and go, okay, now that we are followers of Jesus, then what does that mean for us? Well, what does it mean for us to bless others like Jesus blessed so many? And not just blessing for blessing's sake, and not just doing good for doing good's sake, but to do that with the hopes that we can help other people know and follow Jesus like we know and follow Jesus. And so throughout each week, we've talked about how we all have people in our life that either are de-churched, unchurched, they're far from God, maybe they're spiritually seeking, they wouldn't even say that they fully know who God is or if God even exists. And maybe that's some of you in the room, or you're joining us online, and maybe that's your situation spiritually and intellectually and philosophically and theologically as well? And if so, then we're so glad you're here. We're so glad that you are joining us, and we pray that you will come to know Jesus like we know Jesus and his redeeming, forgiving, amazing grace. And so we've identified people in our life, in our everyday, normal, going around, doing grocery shopping life that are in that category. And so we call them Franks. And Franks are simply friends, relatives, acquaintances, neighbors, and coworkers, people that we regularly do life with that don't personally know Jesus, or maybe they do personally know Jesus. They're just not connected to a family of faith like we have here at Rocket City Church. And so we've taken the term bless and we've based it off a book by Dave Ferguson and John Ferguson called Bless. If you haven't got the book, go and download it today. It's amazing. And we talk about each letter of the word bless stands for a different practice that we can use in our life to go around and bless others with the idea that we're going to connect them to Jesus in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And so with that, the B is begin with prayer. And we talked all about how prayer is our first card that we play in the game of life to help people know and follow Jesus. And then the L is listen. And listen is so important. If people don't feel heard and listened to, then at the end of the day, they really won't care what we have to say. And then the E stands for eat. And then today is all about the first S of bless, which is serve. And this week, we had a neat opportunity that came our way. One of the local principals here in town that my two kids go to their elementary school, they contacted us and they said, hey, would Rocket City Church be interested in serving our teachers, administration, and staff this week? To which we thought about it and we said, no, not really. We're not really into serving our community. We said no. We said yes. We would love the privilege to be able to serve you guys in a special way. And so we were able to serve them. And for us, nothing says love and serving and blessing like Bigfoot donuts and hot, fresh coffee, right? And so we were able to deliver donuts and coffee to the school and just share how much we care about them, and we know how crazy of a year it has been. And just a quick aside, your generosity helps make things like this happen. You know, sometimes I think that we think in the church that it's like we have a whole bag in our back pocket of magic Jesus dust that we just like throw out everywhere, and then like that takes care of everything. And it's actually your obedience to God and giving your first 10% financially back to the Lord that helps us do things that in turn helps bless our community and serve others. So thank you for that. Well, we're talking about serving today, and next week we'll jump to the final S in bless, but we're talking about serving, and a stunning story actually happens in John chapter 13, and that's going to be our story for today. It's found in John chapter 13, and we're going to pick up in verse 1, and Jesus is the main character of the story. And so we see in verse 1, it starts off, it was just before the Passover festival, and Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, wrapped a towel around his waist, and after that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Now let's try to understand, if we can for a moment today, the magnitude of this scene. Jesus was on the eve of his crucifixion. the most excruciating, shameful moment in his life. And here Jesus stands up to wash his disciples' feet. He's the exalted one. We just sang about it. He's the King of Kings. He's God's Son, and he also is fully God, and yet he takes on the very nature of a servant. No one in Christ has more power than he does. No one is higher than he is. No one has accumulated more wealth of the earth than he has. And yet he decides to wash feet. Now look, washing feet in the first century AD was an incredibly dirty, low social status job. The person in the house that had the lowest standing in the house was the one that would always wash guest feet. Because if you walked around the dirt roads in that day and you had sandals that oftentimes were open-toed and open to the air, then your feet were the nastiest part of your body. And so I began to think, well, who kind of serves us today in this way? And I thought about people that bus tables at restaurants and how you don't really know their names. You rarely see them, but if they don't do their job, everybody knows it. And everybody feels it. And maybe, just maybe, it would have been the same dynamic there in that day, that people didn't really care who the person was that were washing their feet. They just were glad that their feet were getting washed. You know, I think about even here at Rocket City Church that we have people that show up incredibly early in the morning to set all of this up. And if you're joining us online, they set up the camera that you're watching through, and they're doing all the things that you don't see. But if they don't do their job, if they don't serve in that capacity, then we are not here doing what we are doing. It's a very thankless role. It's a behind-the-scenes role. And this was a big deal in the New Testament day, in Jesus' day, because in first century AD, in that part of the Middle East, it was an honor and shame culture. Now, we don't know a lot about honor and shame cultures here in our world today. We don't have a capacity in many ways culturally for that. But in that day, it was the one thing you did do for your family and your community is bring honor to them with your life and with how you acted and what you said and what you did. And then the one thing that you didn't do was bring shame to your family and to your community. And so this is why, hang with me, this is why Peter responds in verse 6 like he does. Jesus came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" I mean, you can understand, right? Honor, shame culture, like that's the low job, like you're Jesus, you're the one I've been following all these years, like you're up here, like the rest of us are kind of here, and then like washing feet job is way down here. And Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." That's where that response comes from. It was a cultural understanding for Peter. Peter knew the social code of the day, and only low people wash feet. And here's Jesus trying to wash and ultimately washing his feet. Imagine for a moment with me, somebody comes to your house for dinner, and they're not just an everyday neighbor or coworker or family member, whatever, but it's like somebody special. I mean, they have a bit of fame about them, a bit of notoriety about them. And so I got to thinking it was the NFL draft here recently. I'm a big college football fan. So I got to thinking, well, what if a coach, excuse me, came to your house on a recruiting visit? And I'm like, well, who could that be that might show up? So I thought about the coach himself. All right. So I thought about Coach Saban showing up at your house, doing a little recruiting visit. You have dinner, everything goes great. And then he says, "Hey, can I go to the restroom?" And you say, "Sure." The restroom is right around the corner in the hallway there. And so he goes, and he doesn't come out. And you're like, and you kind of hear some weird noises. And you're like, "Coach, like, what's going on?" So you kind of slip over there, and the door's kind of cracked open. So you peek in a little bit, and you realize all of a sudden that Coach Saban's in there washing and cleaning your toilet. All right? Now, a couple of reactions. All right, so if you are an Alabama fan, then you're like mortified, right? Like, Coach, what are you doing? Coach, no, give me that brush and get up, go. Look, no, I'm going to take care of this. You're Coach Nick Saban, Hall of Fame college football coach. No. And then like if you're an Auburn fan, right? Then and really any other fan in any other team in college football, then you're going to be like, yeah, you missed a spot, Coach. Just if you could get that over there in the corner. And matter of fact, I got a couple other restrooms in the house. But if you're like me, you're going to start to tear up a little bit, and you're going to get emotional, maybe, like I would, because it would give me some time, and it would give me some time to ask him, Coach, things were going so well in Baton Rouge, and you jilted us. Can I just get an explanation for why you felt the need to do that? Okay. But that'd be crazy, right? Like, why would he stoop down and clean your restroom? And probably the uncomfort or the discomfort, the uncomfortableness that you would feel in that moment that I would have felt if that was the case at my house. Multiply that times 100, and that's how Peter felt in this moment. And how does Jesus respond to Peter's refusal to let him wash his feet? Well, let's keep reading. Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." And Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you." Now Peter didn't know the full story here, but we know the full story, and that in just a few short hours, Jesus would be crucified, and he would lose his dignity, and he would be shamed in the worst possible way, and he would go to the cross for us. He would take on our guilt and shame. And that which had no shame and had no sin takes on our sin and our shame. But for now, Jesus washes his followers' feet. Look, here's what I want to drive home for us today is Jesus in this moment ushers in an entirely new paradigm shift. You see, in that day, it was all about how much you had and what your title was and how much you had in the bank and who you were socially. That meant that you were someone of importance. And Jesus says, it's actually the direct opposite. If you're not willing to serve others, you can't be a part of the kingdom that I'm bringing to earth. If you think leadership and followership and being a part of what I'm doing, my Jesus movement, is about titles and money and stuff and power, then you're completely missing the point. That's not the kingdom I'm ushering in. The story continues. Look at verse 12. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and he returned to his place. "Do you understand what I've done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things," catch this, "you will be" what? You will be what? You will be blessed if you do them. The message here is pretty simple. It's our turn as followers and disciples of Jesus to turn around and do our part in ushering in a new kingdom
that is not about the name tag on our shirt, that is not about the size of our accounts. It's about how low we are willing to go to serve other people. There's nothing that we won't do to see other people, our franks, our friends, our relatives, our acquaintances, our neighbors, our coworkers, come to know the love of Christ that we have in our hearts. We will set aside our crown for an apron. Matthew 20:26, one of my favorite passages in Scripture. And it says, instead, Jesus says, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to what? Serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Even the very Son of God came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. The Old Testament, starting in Genesis, running all the way to the end of the Old Testament, it was originally written in the Hebrew language. And so most of us today don't read and speak Hebrew, at least in the States. And so we have English translations of the Bible. And scholars translate as best they can. They take the cultural context of the day, they take the meaning of the word, and they try to apply it as best they can to our context today. And so in the Old Testament, when you see the word bless, the original language there in the Hebrew, it occurs over 350 times or so in the Old Testament. That's a lot. And there's two observations that I want you to gather. One is that when it shows up, it gives this idea of adding coins to a scale, also known as adding value to someone's life. That was the connotation in the Old Testament of when you went to bless somebody else, that you were adding coins to their scale of life. And second observation, it happens a lot and it's a really big deal. It's a really big deal. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they all talk about how they're blessed to in turn be a blessing. They all mention it. Translation for us today: who are you blessing? Who are you adding coins to their scale? And you say, well, Brian, what do you mean? Well, who are you praying for that they can come to know God like you know God? Who are you listening to as often as God brings those franks your way, doing everyday normal life? Who are you listening to and closing your own mouth and opening your own ears and saying and thinking to yourself, wow, this person really has a lot going on. And all I did was say, hey, how's your day going? Who are you grabbing a cup of coffee with, or grabbing lunch with, or inviting over to your home for a meal, just so you can get to know them better because you're not sure where they are with faith and Jesus and God and everything in between? Because you know that eternity hangs in the balance, and this life, this world, this body is all temporal. It's all temporal. And so we have a perspective, and we know that we have a Jesus and a Lord that we're following that has forgiven us so much that we want the love that we have from Him to exude onto other people so that they can get a sense that, man, there's something different about this person. They're trying to serve me right now by buying my lunch, and I should be serving them. They sat there for an hour and listened to me and all my problems. I haven't even heard how they're doing. Who are you serving? And look, it's not just serving for serving's sake, and it's not just, and that's good. I mean, that principle stems from Christ. You know, all these serve days, and let's organize our workplace and go out and do good. I mean, you know where that comes from.
It comes from Jesus. It comes from the paradigm shift that he ushered in. Look, in the Roman Empire at that time, there was no serve days, right? It was called the low of the low people do all the grunt work, and we sit there and watch them do it. It was the church, it was the people of Jesus that ushered in a new way of seeing people and loving people and caring for people from birth to the grave. Not the non-Jesus folks. But today, who are you putting coins on their scale? Look, and I know this is going to sound confusing, hang with me. Jesus followers are people with an agenda who have no agenda. You say, Brian, you're talking out of two sides of your mouth here, right? Yes and yes. The people of Jesus are people that have an agenda, and you know what our agenda is? It's simply to bless you. That's it. It's just to bless you. But then we have an agenda, and our agenda is that we want you to know and follow Jesus. That's our mission statement here at Rocket City Church, like we know and follow Jesus. Look, we don't have it all figured out. We're still learning, we're still growing, we're still following him to new places and new mountains that we're trying to climb with him as he's leading us. But the peace that he provides, the grace that he provides, the forgiveness that he provides, the redemption that's available in him, the hope that there's peace and there's eternity with Christ on the other side of the pain that this world offers. Like, look, every time we serve, we add value to people. And so, yes, the people of King Jesus, of the Jesus follower movement, like we're people that have a project with no project. We're people that have an underlying story with no ultimate story. We just want to bless you. We're people with a secret who have no secret. We're people with a motive that have no motive. And our agenda, well, it's summed up in Jesus. Like that's our agenda. So if you think, well, man, people are always trying to, show me Jesus, and well, that's our agenda. And then there's a part B to that. That just sits on itself. But part B is the church. And look, for some crazy reason, and I'm scratching my head, still trying to figure out why this is. For some crazy reason, look, God could just, we're his kids, and he could just zap all of us and make us just perfect and everything just right. But for some reason, he chooses to use us, the church. Paul talks about it. We are the bride of Christ to do his work here on the earth, to do the blessing. So translation, every time you encourage your kid's little league coach and do something for them, for all the ways your child has driven them up the wall and down during the season, you add value, right? Every time you make a meal and you deliver it to a neighbor because you just heard they had surgery or they had a tough week at work, you add value to them. Every time you face your anxiety in a social setting and you say, you know what, this year, I'm going to go to the work party even though I don't want to go, but I'm going to go because I know there's going to be a lot of people there that are far from God. And maybe, just maybe, at some point in the night, if I show up and I face my fears and I show up and I engage, even though, God, you know I'm not that great at this, but I engage, then God, maybe, just maybe, I can put coins on someone's scale for you. And maybe, just maybe, I'll take a step towards them and then they'll take a step towards you. And maybe you might even come up, God, I don't know. But I'm going to give it a shot because I'm going to go and I'm going to try to bless them and serve them. Every time you choose to make eye contact with your server at the restaurant
and you say their name and you learn their name, and then when you leave, you leave a generous tip. You add value and you bless them. Earlier I showed a picture, two pictures actually, of a couple of Rocket City churchers that served our community on our behalf this week. Well, I've got another picture, and there we go. Well, I've got another picture that I want to show you, and you can go just to that blank screen. Here it is. And I know it's an absolutely blank black screen. And I actually have the picture on my phone, but I'm not going to put it on the screen. And here's why. This week, we found out about someone from here, from Rocket City Church, acknowledged to my wife and I that, hey, we're connected, that we know that you know somebody that we know. And I want to let you know that they have a really hard situation coming up this week, which was this past week. And we knew of the situation, but we didn't know the day and the memory and all this kind of this pain that was associated with it. And he goes, I don't know. I wanted to let you know that because I think you guys know this person. And we said, okay. And during that week, my wife spoke up and said, well, hey, what if we got them this and just gave it to them on that day that's going to be so hard for them? And look, this person, to our knowledge, is not connected to a church, a family of faith, is trying to figure things out with God and them. And so we did. And my wife picked up the gift, and we gave the gift. And when we gave the gift, and I couldn't grab my phone quick enough. And so I had to get the picture afterwards. But the mental, I'll just introduce you to the mental picture in my mind. There were hugs, there were tears. It resulted in this person coming later to our house for dinner. And there was no mention of God or Jesus or faith. It was just us serving someone that was having an incredibly hard week. Now, you know that we're praying for them. We're listening to them as much as we can. We literally shared a meal with them, and we're trying to serve them with the hopes, you guys. Remember, no agenda with an agenda. With the hopes that they will come to know and follow Jesus like we know and follow Jesus. But we don't have any control over their decision. We just have control over all of this that God has given us. And we can take that and we can say, okay, we just want to bless and we just want to listen and we want to pray and we want to eat and we want to serve. And then we're going to talk about next week, the final S. Look, don't let the only time you serve other people be in an organized church project. It's the little ways that you add value to people's life daily, and you look for that and you say, God, open a door for me today. And then open another door for me to listen to somebody else tomorrow. And maybe, just maybe, we can go all the way to the end and I can share all that God's done for me. And then you wake up again the next day and you look down. I should have had a bunch of extras, right? Pretend like those are still there. And then you wake up the next day and you look down and you're like, oh my goodness, God, I thought I gave away all of my coins trying to add value to other people. I must have not done a good job. And he's like, no, this is my kingdom. And in my kingdom, when you give everything away, then guess what? You get 10 times that back. Like, that's the way that I operate. But the more you try to hold on to it, and because see, this is the way most people operate, is they do everything they can to use you to add coins to their scale. Because ultimately life is about them. Every once in a while, okay, I'll give something here and bless somebody every so often there. But really, I'm hoping that's going to come back to me. And it's only in understanding that we serve one that took every part of himself, and he used it to bless others. And in turn, he created a new way to measure. And in Jesus' kingdom, it's about doing everything in our power to bless others, to listen to them, to serve them, to pray for them, to eat with them as Jesus was doing, to wash their feet, to scrub their toilet, all with the hopes that maybe, just maybe, along the way, they'll see something different in you. And they'll say, you know what, I don't know what you're all about, but I keep seeing you talk about this crazy place called Rocket City Church. You know what, I don't have a church home. Could I be a part of what you're doing? God, as we close down this morning, Lord, we are reminded of the need of you. God, we can't do this on our own. We can't bless others on our own. We can't love others that are hard to love. God, it requires you showing up and doing what only you can do. And so, God, I pray that today, that as we talk about serving, it's not just serving for serving's sake, God. It's serving so that, God, other people can come to know and follow you like we know and follow you. And God, over time, these small deposits that we're making in people's lives that we see regularly, God, it'll add up and it'll add up and it'll add up. And one day it'll tip the scale in your favor, not our favor, in your favor. God, we just ask that you use us as only you can do. In Christ's name we pray.